So, we're going to tell you the story about a superhero. Once upon a time in a metropolis, there lived a little boy named James, whose only desire was to become a great book critic. He only lived with his mother because his father was never around, and he really liked to read superhero stories. Um, Time passed by, and he eventually discovered that he could do amazing things with his brain, like memorize everything he saw or heard, and came up with a plan in less than 15 seconds. But he realized that while he was around video games, his powers didn't work.
So one night, Teresa was heading home. Teresa is James' mother. So one night, Teresa was heading home, and as she was walking by, two very suspicious men, took her by the arms, and as she fought, they stabbed her. And they left poor Teresa lying there, bleeding to death. And sadly, there were no witnesses until a couple passed by and saw the body and immediately called 911. But when they arrived, it was too late. When they identified the body, they called James, and he was broken, but because he kept thinking about what he could have done if he was there. And then he decided he would become someone that would help defenseless people.
The news of James started spreading around very quickly till they came to a girl named Elisa. She was a very bubbly person, but she hated young and smart boys, and her only desire was to rule the world with video games. So since she hated smart and young boys, she decided to make a plan to kill James. And meanwhile, James's powers were growing out very quickly.
So James continued being a superhero for a while, and then once they met each other at a street, and they saw some kids like arguing and having a small fight, and they both like came in, and now they started arguing and about if books were useful or not. So they both like started to uh, feel in need to use their superpowers to fight. But then Alisa noticed that she couldn't use her powers, and that's where the story ends. And each one of us did our endings.
So, in my ending, as James was walking to the library, when he arrived there, he saw Alyssa waiting for him. And he asked, "Are you here for a rematch?" And Alyssa answered, "It's not going to be much of a rematch." And they had a huge fight, which eventually left the city destroyed. Not the whole city, but a lot of the city was destroyed. And Alisa lost because a truck full of Cheetos fell on her, and Cheetos are her greatest weakness. So yeah, she lost. And after that, she went to rehab and became one of the greatest teachers because James gave her a second chance. And James continued doing his great job as a world savior.
So, in my ending, basically, Alyssa and James became lovers. Time passed by after this fight, and Alyssa and James realized that they couldn't stop thinking about each other. So one day, James was helping people because he helped people, and Alyssa came by, and they talked about their feelings. And Alyssa told him that he really liked him, and he told her the same. And yeah, I really chose this ending because, to be honest, I'm a hopeless romantic, so I thought it would be nice to become this story like enemies becoming lovers.
So my ending was that James, on his way back home, found a little girl being bullied by some kids because she liked to read and because she was very smart. James saved her and took her home with her parents. And when they got home, James realized that the girl he had just saved was Alisa's younger sister. Her name was Sophia. And after that, James and Alisa had a deep conversation where she realized that there was no point in making fun of people, or making fun of people who like books, or smart people, or people in general. So at the end, James became one of the most famous critics of all times, and Elisa discovered that Sophia had superpowers too. So they both became one of the two best superheroines in the world. And I chose this ending because I wanted it to have a message. And the message would be that you should put yourself in the shoes of others. Like, you should think about your actions and how it can affect other people's lives.
Well, my ending was that at the time they were about to begin the fight, she saw like a big ship of cyborg robots like coming in, and then an explosion was made in the center of the city, and when they woke up in cells in a prison, and they were now like prisoners, and they will they now had to work together to go out, and they discovered they weren't the only superheroes in the world that were caged in there. They found other superheroes, and then they talked with Iron Man and with Flash, and they made a plan to restart the universe and to protect all the cities, because now the citizens felt like unprotected because they didn't have superheroes.
In my ending, a week later after the confrontation they had in the story, they have an epic duel, but when they're fighting, they realize none of them like was gonna win. So they decided to work as a team in the future. And after 2 years of working together in the city, they realized they didn't want to do they didn't want to fight crime together for their whole life. So they decided to only do it for 3 more years. And and after 3 more years, each one was gonna make like their own family and have their own life. And I decided to give the story this ending, to give it a not so predictable one, and an ending where the both ended up happy in their own way.